What kind of man writes a letter he never meant to be read? The question echoes through the silence like a ghost that refuses to rest. Somewhere, buried under decades of dust and forgotten wars, a metal box was found, small, rusted, and sealed tight. Inside it, a single letter, the paper yellowed by time and stained with something that looked like dried blood. The signature at the bottom was simple: a commander, no name, in rank, no address. Just that, a confession that was never supposed to reach another pair of eyes. They say every soldier carries two battles, the one fought on the field and the one that never ends inside his own mind. This letter belongs to the second kind. It's not a report, not a strategy, not even a farewell. It's a voice trembling between guilt and truth, between what was ordered and what was done. It's the kind of message written by a man who can't sleep at night because the war never left him. As the paper unfolds, it's like opening a wound that was never meant to heal. You can almost hear his breathing between the words, heavy, uncertain, human. He speaks to no one, yet to everyone at once. "If you found this," he writes, "then maybe the world deserves to know what I tried to bury." The words cut deeper than bullets. And you start to wonder, what could a commander confess that he chose silence over redemption? Imagine living with a secret so heavy that it outlives you, a choice made in the chaos of battle, a single decision that cost lives and left a scar no medal could ever cover. He knew his actions would never appear in the history books. He wasn't looking for glory, only relief. A moment to breathe before the memories consumed what was left of him. You already feel it, don't you? That tension between duty and guilt, between survival and morality. Because in war, heroes and monsters are often the same men, separated only by a single moment of hesitation. Stay with me until the end. What you're about to hear isn't just a story from the past. It's a confession that challenges what we think we know about honor, obedience, and the human heart. Maybe it's not the kind of story you want to hear, but it's one you'll never forget. And as we unfold this letter, the one that was never meant to be read, you'll begin to understand why some truths are buried deeper than the dead. Maybe that's why this letter feels different. It isn't just words on paper. It's a pulse, faint but alive, reaching across time. Every sentence carries the weight of something unspoken, something all of us, in one way or another, have felt before. Regret, the kind that doesn't fade, no matter how much you try to bury it under reason or silence. If you've ever made a choice that still echoes in your mind, if there's something you wish you could undo, then you already understand the heart of this story. Because guilt isn't only for soldiers or commanders, it's human. It's what reminds us that we still care, that there's still a part of us fighting to be forgiven. And if this touches something inside you, if a memory, a face, or even a feeling comes back while you listen, I want to hear about it. Share it in the comments below, not for the algorithm, not for the numbers, but because stories like this deserve to breathe again. When you share your thoughts, you give voice to others who might be carrying their own silent letters hidden deep inside. If this message resonates with you, take a second to like this video. It's such a simple thing, but it tells me that this kind of story still matters. And if you want to keep walking through these forgotten confessions and human truths with me, make sure you're subscribed. Your presence here is what keeps this channel alive, what allows us to keep uncovering voices that were meant to be lost forever. Because maybe that's what this is really about, connection between the living and the dead, between what was said and what was left unsaid. Stay with me, because the next lines of this letter will take us even deeper into the mind of a man haunted by his own decisions. The discovery didn't happen in a museum or a battlefield. It was in the ruins of a forgotten shelter, half swallowed by the earth and silence. The air was heavy with dust, the kind that tastes like time itself. A group of restoration workers had been clearing out debris, expecting nothing more than rusted helmets and scraps of metal. But one of them, a young technician, found a small steel box wedged behind a collapsed wall. No markings, no lock, just sealed shut, as if it was never meant to be opened again. When they finally forced it open, the sound it made was eerie, almost like a breath escaping. Inside there was no treasure, no weapon, no military insignia, only a single envelope, sealed with wax long since cracked by age. Its paper was brittle, edges burned, as though it had survived fire, and yet the words inside were intact. "To whom it may concern," it began. But the ink trembled, and even those words seemed unsure of who they were meant for. The letter felt alive, not just because of what it said, but because of what it carried, the weight of something unfinished. There was an energy in that room that no one could quite explain. Some said it was the echo of war, others believed it was just imagination. But deep down, everyone felt it. The presence of someone who had once stood there, watching, waiting. The letter wasn't just found, it had been released. As the restoration team passed it around, there was hesitation. Should they read it? Should they hand it over to the authorities? One man swore he heard whispers, faint, almost like the sound of a radio picking up an old frequency. Perhaps it was the wind, perhaps it was the past trying to speak again, because some truths refuse to die quietly. They linger in places where pain once lived, waiting for someone brave enough to open them. Now I want to go even deeper into this, because this discovery isn't just about a forgotten letter. It's about what it represents. Every one of us carries something we've buried, a version of ourselves trapped in the ruins of our own past. That's the real battlefield, the war between memory and forgiveness. And maybe this commander's confession is more than a record of guilt. Maybe it's a mirror reflecting the hidden parts we'd rather not face. There's a reason this message surfaced now, after all these years. Maybe history doesn't repeat itself. Maybe it whispers quietly until someone finally listens. And if you felt that whisper too, that pull towards something unresolved, write one word in the comments: truth. When the tape was finally restored, the static came first. A faint hum, like the sound of air trapped between walls. Then a voice, rough, tired, human. It didn't start with rank or title, not even a greeting. Just a single phrase, quiet but heavy. "If you're hearing this, then I've already failed." There was no pride in the tone, no authority left, only the exhaustion of a man who had carried too much for too long. He didn't call himself a commander. He called himself a man who once believed he was doing the right thing. And in those words, you could feel the weight of everything he had lost. He spoke slowly, as if every word cost him a piece of himself. There was no anger, no attempt to justify, only the sound of someone standing face to face with his own truth. "This isn't a request for forgiveness," he said. "Forgiveness belongs to those who still have time." His voice trembled, breaking through the static, a reminder that even strength has an expiration point. What he wanted, more than redemption, was to make sure his truth didn't vanish with him. It's strange, isn't it? How sometimes the things we try to bury end up defining who we are. He had spent years silencing the ghosts of that night, yet here he was, confessing not to the world, but to the silence itself. It was as if he knew that speaking the truth, even into emptiness, was the only way to make peace with it. The more he spoke, the more his words stopped sounding like a confession and started sounding like a warning. About pride, about obedience, about the moment a good man crosses a line and never finds his way back. There was something almost sacred about the way he described his failure, not as a single event, but as a transformation. He wasn't the same man who had given the orders. Somewhere between the screams and the silence, something inside him had shattered. What remained was not guilt alone, but clarity. A brutal, unfiltered understanding of what war truly takes from a person. Not just lives, but meaning. Now I want to go even deeper into this, because what this man left behind wasn't just a confession. It was a mirror reflecting the human condition itself. the hidden truths we avoid, the decisions that shape us, and the price of conviction when it collides with consequence. His voice, trembling through the static, wasn't only about failure, it was about awakening, a realization that the hardest battle is not against an enemy, but against the part of yourself that refuses to accept what you've done. As the tape continues, the silence between his words feels louder than the words themselves. And somewhere in that silence, we begin to understand that what he's really describing isn't just war, it's what happens after it ends. If you're still listening and this thought resonates with you, write one word in the comments: awakened. He said it started like any other mission, quiet, cold, disciplined, the kind of night when the air itself feels like it's holding its breath. They were deep behind enemy lines, moving through ruins swallowed by shadows. The objective was simple: extract a group of civilians trapped in an abandoned factory. Everything had been planned to perfection. Routes marked, time synchronized, communications tested. But war doesn't care about plans. It only cares about timing, and that night time wasn't on their side. As he described it, his voice grew heavier, as if every memory dragged him closer to the edge of something he didn't want to face. "We thought we were ghosts," he said, "invisible, but ghosts don't bleed." The first shot broke the silence like glass, followed by a storm of gunfire that tore through the darkness. Chaos erupted. Men who had trusted each other with their lives were suddenly swallowed by confusion and fear. Orders turned into screams, formation into instinct. The mission, he realized, had never been theirs to win. It had been a trap from the very beginning. He spoke of the sound, not the explosions, but the silence that came after. That heavy, suffocating quiet when you realize the world has stopped moving and you're still alive when you shouldn't be. Smoke burned his throat, and somewhere in the distance, he could still hear the cries of the wounded calling for help that would never come. "I remember their names," he whispered. "I remember every single one." The words cracked, trembling under the weight of loss. That's when you start to understand the real cruelty of war. It doesn't just kill bodies, it erases futures, it rewrites souls. He admitted that he kept repeating the same order in his mind, over and over again: advance, retreat, survive. But nothing made sense anymore. The lines between bravery and madness blurred. They had gone there to save lives, but by the UV, and all that was left were echoes and ashes. His hands, still shaking decades later, could remember what his mind tried to forget. The metallic smell of blood mixed with rain, the sight of light fading from eyes that had once trusted him completely. Now I want to go even deeper into this, because what he described wasn't just a failed mission. It was the breaking point of a man's spirit. There's a truth hidden in those moments that no report or medal could ever capture. It's the truth about leadership, responsibility, and the unbearable cost of decisions made under pressure. Behind every act of courage, there's a shadow, a voice whispering what could have been different if just one decision, 1 second, had changed. That's what makes his story more than a tale of war. It's a mirror of every moment in life when control slips away and fate takes over. If this part of the story spoke to something inside you, write one word in the comments: memory. He hesitated before saying it, as if the words themselves resisted leaving his mouth. There was a pause, long, fragile, the kind of silence that only exists when a person is about to expose the part of themselves they've spent a lifetime hiding. "I was told to abort," he finally admitted. "The order came through clear as day, but I didn't listen." His breathing grew heavier, almost like he was back there again, standing in the cold, with the radio crackling and the weight of command pressing against his chest. "I thought I knew better. I thought I was saving them." He explained how the decision wasn't made out of defiance, but out of conviction. He truly believed that pushing forward would change the outcome, that the cost of retreat would be greater than the risk of advancing. In that moment, he wasn't driven by orders or fear. He was driven by purpose, by the illusion of control. I wanted to be the kind of leader who brought his men home, he said, but instead, I became the reason they never did. Those words didn't sound rehearsed. They sounded raw, stripped of every layer of justification he had once used to survive himself. There's something deeply human about that, the way we sometimes mistake certainty for courage. He wasn't confessing a tactical failure. He was confronting a truth that lives inside everyone who's ever had to make an irreversible choice. We tell ourselves we act for the right reasons, that our intentions justify the outcome. But deep down, we know the truth. Sometimes doing what feels right destroys everything we were trying to protect. He said that after the order came through, he looked at his men, faces lit only by the dim glow of their flashlights, and he couldn't bring himself to turn back, not because he didn't understand the risk, but because he couldn't bear the thought of explaining later why he didn't try harder. That's the paradox of leadership, the quiet arrogance of believing that your decision alone can rewrite destiny. I thought I was stronger than fear, he said, but fear is smarter than pride. Now I want to go even deeper into this, because what he's describing isn't just a military failure. It's a mental battle that mirrors every moment in life when conviction collides with consequence. His story exposes the truth hidden in the shadows of responsibility, how easily the line between heroism and blindness can blur when emotion takes command. It's the psychology of control, the need to feel that our choices have meaning, even when the world reminds us how powerless we really are. He ends this part of the recording with a voice barely audible, almost trembling. I thought I was protecting them, he whispers, but I was really protecting myself from feeling useless. That's the kind of honesty that cuts deeper than regret. It's not about what happened that night anymore. It's about what happens inside a man when the mirror finally shows him who he truly is. If this moment resonates with you, write one word in the comments: decision. His voice cracked when he reached that part, the moment that had been hiding between his pauses, the truth he had circled around but never spoken aloud. They were trapped, he said softly. No cover left, no way out. The enemy was closing in, and the screams, I can still hear them. You could almost feel the air leaving his lungs as the next words came out. Not shouted, not confessed, but surrendered. So I called the strike on our own position. A long silence followed, heavier than any explosion. Then, in a tone that seemed to collapse under its own weight, he added, I killed my own. Those 4 words carried everything: guilt, defiance, love, and loss, all at once. It wasn't a confession built for forgiveness. It was the kind of truth that burns through the soul and leaves nothing standing behind it. He said that in the seconds before the bombs fell, he heard one of his men laugh, a short, nervous laugh, the kind that comes when reality finally breaks. He looked at me, the commander whispered, and I think he knew. That single moment haunted him more than the destruction that followed. Not the blast, not the screams, but that look. The silent understanding between 2 men who both realized that this was how it would end. He tried to explain the decision, to rationalize it, but the words tangled between reason and remorse. I thought, maybe the fire would cover their retreat, he said. Maybe it would scare the enemy long enough for someone to make it out. But he knew that wasn't true. Deep down, he admitted, he had already accepted that no one would. What he couldn't accept was leaving them to be captured, to be broken, humiliated, used. In his mind, this was mercy. In his heart, it was damnation. Now I want to go even deeper into this, because this isn't just about war. It's about the unbearable burden of choice. When a person reaches the point where every option is wrong, and yet one must still decide, it's the darkest corner of leadership, the place where morality collapses under the weight of necessity. The commander didn't lose his soul in that moment. He traded it, willingly, for what he believed would save others from suffering. That's the paradox of humanity. Sometimes compassion and cruelty wear the same face. He said that after the strike, There was only silence. No more orders, no more screams, just the sound of rain falling over fire. "It should have been me," he murmured, "but the world doesn't give you that choice." His voice faded then, trembling between confession and collapse. And maybe that's where the truth of all this lives. Not in the act itself, but in the aftermath, in the unbearable question that never stops echoing. Was there another way? If this moment hit you the way it hit me, write one word in the comments. Mercy. After the war ended, his voice changed. It no longer carried the tone of command, only the quiet exhaustion of someone who had outlived himself. The recordings grew softer, slower, as if the weight of silence had become heavier than the gunfire ever was. He spoke of years spent in isolation, far from the noise of cities and the distraction of people. A cabin, he said, near the edge of a forest where the trees were tall enough to drown out the echoes of his past. "Out here," he murmured, "the nights are long, and the ghosts don't need names anymore." He lived like that for decades, a man suspended between guilt and memory. Some neighbors thought he had gone mad. They saw him walking at dawn, talking to the air, sometimes standing still for hours in the rain. What they never knew was that he was still on that battlefield every single day. The war had ended for the world, but not for him. It followed him into sleep, into the spaces between heartbeats, into the letters he wrote to no one. He wrote hundreds of them, folded pages scattered across drawers, boxes, even beneath the floorboards. Each one began differently. "Dear, a brother, to whoever finds this, to the men I left behind." But they all ended the same way. "Forgive me, even if I don't deserve it." Sometimes the ink was blurred, smudged by rain or tears. It no longer mattered which. What mattered was that he kept writing, as if every letter could pull him 1 inch closer to peace. Yet the more he wrote, the further that peace seemed to drift. He described the dreams, flashes of faces lit by firelight, voices calling him from places he couldn't reach. He would wake drenched in sweat, his heart racing like he was still under attack. But the most haunting part wasn't the screams or the gunfire, it was the silence after. That endless, unbearable quiet that reminded him he was still alive when others weren't. That was his punishment, and he accepted it, not out of self-pity, but because he believed that carrying the pain was the only way to keep their memory alive. Now, I want to go even deeper into this, because what we're seeing here isn't just a man broken by war. It's a lesson about the weight of remembrance, about how guilt can transform into identity. There's a truth hidden behind those years of silence. Sometimes we hold on to pain because it's the last piece of something we can't let go of. For him, that pain was the connection, the invisible thread tying him to the ones who never came back. He wasn't living anymore, he was keeping vigil. And maybe that's what the letter really is. Not a confession, but a monument built out of words instead of stone. If this reflection resonates with you, write one word in the comments. Forgiveness. He confessed that the letter was never meant to be read. "This was supposed to die with me," he whispered, his voice brittle like the paper it was written on. "These words were never meant to be heard, not by my family, not by history, not by anyone." It wasn't humility that drove him to say that. It was fear. Fear of being remembered for the wrong reasons. Fear of being understood too late. He said that writing the letter was the only way he could speak without lying. "I spent years building walls around the truth," he said, "but the truth doesn't stay buried. It rots from the inside until it consumes what's left of you." You could feel that this wasn't just the voice of a soldier anymore. It was the voice of an old man standing at the edge of his life, trying to leave behind something that wasn't redemption, but release. His breath came in uneven waves. Every word felt like an effort, every pause like a countdown. "When death gets close enough," he said, "you stop fearing it. What you fear instead is being forgotten." That line lingered in the air like smoke, not dramatic, not rehearsed, but real. It revealed something deeper than regret, the need to be seen, even in shame. He explained that he had carried the letter for years, folded, hidden in a tin box beneath his bed. It was the one secret he refused to destroy. "I couldn't let it go," he admitted, "because, as long as it existed, a part of me was still telling the truth. He knew no one would ever find it, and yet he wrote as if someone someday might." That contradiction defined his final years, a man torn between silence and confession, punishment and peace. Now I want to go even deeper into this, because what he reveals here isn't just about guilt, it's about the psychology of letting go. Every person carries a truth they hope no one discovers, and yet deep down they crave to be understood. It's human nature to seek witness, someone to hear the things we could never say aloud. For him, this letter wasn't about clearing his name or rewriting the past. It was about preserving the raw, unfiltered version of himself before time erased it. The version that had made mistakes, felt fear, and still dared to love what was lost. His voice weakened further. The words began to blur, drifting between consciousness and surrender. "If this letter ever leaves these walls," he whispered, "let it remind you, not of me, but of what men become when they forget that war doesn't end when the shooting stops." That was his truth, a truth he hoped would survive, even if he didn't. And as he took his final breaths, his last words were almost inaudible, carried more by emotion than sound. "Forgive the silence." If that sentence touched something inside you, write one word in the comments: truth. The final part of the recording begins with a long stretch of silence, so long that at first it seems like the tape has ended, but then faintly his voice returns, softer now, slower, like a candle flickering in its last breath of air. "If this letter is ever found," he says, "don't remember me as a commander. Remember me as a man who finally learned what it means to lose." The words hang there, fragile and incomplete, echoing through the static. It's not just a confession anymore. It's a surrender, not to guilt, but to truth itself. He doesn't ask for forgiveness. He doesn't plead for understanding. What he's seeking, if anything, is recognition. The quiet acceptance that even those who lead can break. "All my life," he continues, "I thought victory was about surviving. But now I see. Survival is its own kind of punishment." His tone shifts between clarity and fatigue, each word carrying the weight of decades spent wrestling with his own reflection. You can almost imagine him sitting in the dark, the recorder glowing faintly in front of him, his hands trembling as he speaks. The words that he knows will outlive him. There's something deeply unsettling and deeply human about his final moments. They don't sound like the ending of a story, but like the realization that some stories never end. He wasn't trying to erase his past or rewrite it. He was trying to understand it. Maybe that's what redemption really is. Not forgiveness, but comprehension. The moment when a man finally stops running from the truth and turns to face it, even if it's already too late. He mentions the faces again, the ones he can't forget. "They visit me sometimes," he whispers, "not in dream, in the spaces between them." His voice fades into a fragile rhythm of breathing and static, until even the sound of the wind becomes part of his confession. And in that wind, there's a strange calm, as if the world itself is listening, acknowledging his pain without judgment. Now I want to go even deeper into this, because what we hear in those final seconds isn't just the end of a recording, it's the essence of humanity stripped bare. The need for meaning, the hunger for redemption, and the acceptance that some wounds are not meant to heal. His last words weren't about war. They were about life, about the cost of carrying truth alone and the liberation that comes from finally letting it speak. Whether he found peace or punishment in those final breaths, no one can say. But maybe that's the point. Redemption and damnation aren't opposites. They're just two sides of the same surrender. If this reflection stirred something inside you, write one word in the comments: loss. The narration fades back in, gentle, but haunting. The letter was never meant to be read, but now that it was, what would you have done in his place? The question doesn't demand an answer. It lingers, echoing in that quiet space between conscience and curiosity. Because deep down, we all know what it means to carry a choice we can't take back. The difference is that his choices were written in fire, while ours may be written in silence. The story of this commander isn't just about war. It's about the invisible battles we all fight. The moments when doing nothing feels as unbearable as doing the wrong thing. It makes you wonder, what defines a person more? Their actions, or how they live with them afterward? Some people spend a lifetime trying to justify the past. Others learn to coexist with it. Maybe that's the real transformation, not erasing the pain, but learning to breathe. And through it, his letter, though born of despair, reveals something powerful about human nature. The need to be remembered not for our victories, but for our humanity. Now, I want to go even deeper into this. Because when we uncover stories like his, we aren't just exploring history, we're looking into the truth hidden within ourselves. Every confession, every silence, every regret leaves a mark on the collective memory of what it means to be human. And perhaps, in understanding his pain, we find pieces of our own we've tried to ignore. If this part of the story spoke to you, write one word in the comments: reflection. If you made it all the way here, it means this story touched you in some way. Maybe not because of the war, but because of what it reveals about being human. That's exactly what this channel is about, exploring the quiet truths hidden behind the noise, the stories that remind us of the weight and beauty of what it means to feel. So if this kind of reflection speaks to you, consider subscribing, not just to follow another video, but to stay part of a space where emotion, memory, and honesty still matter. Leave a comment below with the phrase, "I stayed until the last word," just so I know you were here, walking through this story with me until the end. It helps me see that these moments still reach people who listen not just with their ears, but with their heart. And if you felt something, even for a second, give this video a like. It's a small gesture, but it tells me that stories like this one still deserve to be told. There's another video right here that connects perfectly with what we just explored. Click it and continue with me there, because some stories aren't meant to end, they're meant to be understood.